So it is very hard to start a business in a socialist country, and at some point I would say that for the most of the people it is almost impossible. By the socialist country I mean the Soviet Union. At that time, in the 70s, 80s, the people were not taught how to be entrepreneurs. They were not taught how to create a good business. But they were taught how to be good teachers, how to be good engineers, politicians, soldiers. And very often, sometimes even, there is a question of how in the world so many rich people and influential people who can influence, for example, the election in the United States came from the east of Europe, particularly from Russia. We heard about that, there is a lot of them. It is very simple to find out. In the end of 80s, early 90s, there was a problem. The Soviet Union was collapsing. The current currency of that time, ruble, was crashing down. People were trying to buy as much as they could for those money that they have, because also the prices were raising up. And it was a very terrible condition for that time for the people. They were losing everything. But for the some, it was a beautiful time. They were gaining as much as they could. And you would be very lucky at that time if you would be the director of the factory or the company, or if you will end up somewhere to be a high-ranked politician in the Soviet Union. Because then, having a bit of brain, a few contacts and influence, you could own a factory, because at that time there was a massive privatization of everything, and it would be like really helpful for you. And therefore today, nowadays, people are criticizing rich people in the East particularly, because they think, and as we seeing from this as an evidence, that all of those rich people that we have now in the East, most of them, they just stole from the government, let's say, because at that time the program was that when the Soviet Union will collapse, every person have to have the same share of the resources of whatever the government had at that time. But because we all know that it wasn't the case, and the rich people took and earned in the first 2-3 years millions of dollars, and because when the currency is crashing down and everything is losing worth, with those money you could buy almost everything in your way, everything what you saw. That's why the people are criticizing those people. But very often this is not a really good way to do that, because there are also other people, even small beginners, entrepreneurs, who starting doing a business, and they have a success in it, but the people still putting pressure on them by saying that, oh, you must have, I don't know, relatives or friends somewhere in the government and they're helping you, therefore we don't like you. And it's very hard to gain a good reputation in the Ukraine, for example, or in Russia, because people basically will not believe if you are rich. And that's why I really wanted to bring you a case of the example of the president of my country, Petro Poroshenko. But I want to talk about not his politician side, but more as a businessman. But in the last quarter of the century, Poroshenko made dozens of the successful projects. Right now he owns few factories that produce different kind of goods, for example food and cars. He owned a bank, and he owned also 2 media channels in the Ukraine, not the major ones, by the way, and this is also very important to remember. But the main success in his life, what he made, is that he built Roshen, a very nice brand in the Eastern markets, and that brand produced a lot of sweets, candies, chocolates, and all the sweet stuff that we like. It is one of the biggest competitors in the world. It is in the top 6, and it's compete with Mars, with all the sneakers and stuff. And I even would say that he is a quite self-made man. He very enthusiastic about the project that he did. Even in one of the conversation with the journalists, he said that he never had in his life unsuccessful project. And except like in reality it almost was like that, but there was only example with the company that he bought that produced the cars, and he was kind of forced to sell it during the crisis in 2008, but it was like the only case that he had some problem in the business. With the rest, he just a successful guy. And how it started, when he was not a student, but he was studying in school, he was around 15, 16 years old. First time he heard in the radio that there was new studies open up in Kiev and Moscow, and it was international relations. And because his parents were not rich in society at that time, his father was basically an engineer and mother was a teacher, and he was like from the simple family. The parents told him immediately that it would be very difficult and almost impossible to enter to that university for this course particularly. Therefore, his father suggests him to go to the military school. There you also can do some international relations, but based on the military. But he still standing on his point, and they tried to go to and apply to the two universities. But there was a problem, because at that time and even it is now, you can have two certificates. And by applying to one of the universities, you have to handle your certificates, original one. So he was forced to go to the school and ask for another certificate, but it was not illegal. So what he did, and it was very funny, basically once I did the same and I was applying to the Netherlands, because I also wanted to be more secure that if I will not pass, for example, here, then I will go to the Ukraine, and that's what he did. They applied to the military school and to the university in Kiev. And yeah, he went to the teacher, not to the teacher, but to the director of the school, and he was kind of, maybe not bribing, because it was very difficult to find information about that, but he basically went to the teacher like this and said, I don't have a certificate and I lost it. Can you give me a new one? Because he really liked chocolate at the time already. So, and what we would expect, the teacher said, or the director said,
I will give you a new one.
So that way he made, or not he made, he added 2 certificates. He applied into the military school and the university, and he successfully passed it. But because you can't be in 2 times like in 2 places in one time, he of course went to the international relations. But after that, in 2 years, when he went to the university, he was forced to go to the military because there was some demographic problems in the Soviet Union, and all students, including international students, and by that I mean the Polish, Ukrainians, Bulgarians, they had to go to the military. In the military, he met a guy. His name was Igor Kononenko. Lately, he became the best friend, and today he's the director of his famous Russian brand. When they finished the military, they were already together, and they came up to Ukraine in 1986, and then they saw the big changes, and it was like exact time when everything was changing. There was the changes in the law, changes in the international trade, the massive privatization of industry and all different markets. And Poroshenko understood that if he wants to be successful, if he don't want to end up being a teacher, and it's not offense because teachers right now, even in Ukraine and maybe in Russia, is not that popular. It's just because of their salary. It's not that high, and it's hard to be a teacher. He knew that he has to have lots of contacts with some people. Therefore, he bring his friend, and they will started looking for the people that might help them to start business. And their first idea was to make a service center. Actually, that was the name of the company, which did basically try to help to the Soviet factories or to the newly created businesses to make the contracts with the international markets. And from that, they get somewhere around 0.51% of their profit from those contracts. And that's why, being in the 4th or 5th year of the university, like 5th year of student, he already earned his first million in terms of rubles, like Russian currency. And by having such amount of money, they already knew that they can do something else. And basically what they saw as a clear advantage, the scarcity in the Soviet Union, of scarcity of different resources. So they bought 4% of the black paper that was available in the market globally. And then they sold it later on, because then they calculated that the prices will rise up. They will earn a lot of money from that. Therefore, afterwards, when they sold it, 70% went to the Western markets, the rest was in the Soviet Union. He earned his first $1 million officially. And after that, he started doing something else, because you can't sell the paper, black paper all the time. And I guess in comparison, it is the same as the Bitcoin right now, or oil, or currency. It was the same trade. And I guess there was a lot of opportunities at that time, because when there is a scarcity, it's much easier to earn, right? Then afterwards, having those millions, he went to the chocolate. And from that time, the people started calling him a chocolate king, or chocolate rabbit, translation from the Ukrainian language, because right now he has the empire of the chocolate fabrics, not only in the Ukraine, but in Russia and in Europe. But at that time, he wanted to buy for those money the main fabric in the Kiev. It wasn't successful because of some political issues. Therefore, he bought first the smallest one that he could, and then later he's showing the new experience, because he saw that those directors at the time, they were not successful. They implemented a bad strategy for their businesses, and therefore, being successful, he bought those factories in the Ukraine that he wanted. And then he started making lots of money. And because when you're making a lot of money and there is still problem in the country, like with the money and stuff, the recession and crisis, you could start buying, as those other people who were criticized, like those corrupted people, buying everything. Of course, he then, with his friends, they made a new bank, not because they needed to, but it was very popular for the people who had the money. And they went so on and so on. After that, he even had the suggestions to go to the politics. Firstly, he refused, but then he understood that it is very difficult to not just to create the business, but to move it, to develop it. And from the perspective of the business, and he knew how to change it. And he really hated of what the politicians at that time did. Therefore, he went to the politics. In the first years, it was very difficult for him. He was not the first in the row person from the famous ones. He always was somewhere behind, and people don't really knew about him. But then came the revolution in 2013, and he was in the first stages. And after that, he became very popular. He said that I'm going to the presidency, and the people start criticizing him very much. They didn't knew about his past. They didn't knew actually how he earned money, how he made his success. And it was very difficult for him. He knew that he wanted to change something in the country at least. And he also knew that by going there and by doing that, he's gonna destroy in some way his reputation, and maybe not only of his reputation, but the reputation of the family, which is a bit hard because he also had the 3 children that he had to raise. But still, he willingly go to that, and that's the exact thing that I wanted to bring you up. That in a society where everyone is criticizing the successful people, it is very difficult to going through that. And some people are not willing to sacrifice their reputation because maybe they want to be a good guy in the end, somewhere in the history books. But he still went through that because he wanted to show to the people, maybe for the future people, that it's still worth to go there. And despite the difficulties, it's better to help to other people rather than sit and enjoy your life. Thank you.